What is going on, everybody? I am back today to talk about a horror movie that was released this year that I feel like was released a little under the radar. I saw some reviews released early of this one, and it was a little bit all over the place, the reactions of people. But I was excited to watch this movie because the director of this film has made two movies that I've really enjoyed: the vampire film 30 Days of Night, the film Hard Candy starring Elliot Page, and also a couple of Black Mirror episodes. And so this is a very capable director who's worked within the horror genre multiple times, and I'd heard that the production on this film was really great and that the premise was really unique and interesting, and I was very excited to check it out. And the movie I'm going to be discussing today is Dark Harvest. Dark Harvest is directed by David Slade. In a cursed town, the annual harvest becomes a brutal battle for survival. On Halloween 1963, Sawtooth Jack, a terrifying legend, rises from the cornfields, threatening the town's children. Groups of boys unite to defeat the murderous scarecrow before midnight. Richie, a rebellious outcast, joins the run, motivated by his brother's previous victory. As the hunt progresses, Richie makes a shocking discovery and faces a pivotal choice to break the relentless cycle. So, as I said, really excited to check this movie out, especially from some of the early reactions that I read about this film. And I thought this movie was a ton of fun. I know there's a lot of criticism about some of the performance elements of it and some of the pacing, and it's not a perfect movie, but what I will say is it's an incredibly entertaining film that bleeds the Halloween October aesthetic, has great practical effects, some really brutal kill sequences, in a really unique lore that I think when you piece it together in your head makes the film all the more fascinating. And I'm excited to tell you a little bit about it today. So, as the plot description states, the big part of this film is something called The Run, and this film is looks to be set in the 1960s, and we're in this small town that's isolated from the rest of the world. Really, there's nothing nearby. Everyone that leaves the town, you can tell they don't really contact back home. There's not a lot of communication with the outside world. At the beginning of the film, we see these kids running from this monster that has a giant pumpkin head, and we find out that that monster's name is Sawtooth Jack. We find out in this small town something has happened where there's a curse or something that has occurred in this town, that every single year this monster Sawtooth Jack comes and has to try to make it to this church by midnight. And all of the young boys in the town are forced essentially by the town to go out and hunt and kill Sawtooth Jack before he can make it to this church by midnight. And at the beginning of the film, we see this young man, Jim, who ends up killing Sawtooth Jack and winning this really expensive car. And shortly after winning, he says, "Hey, I'm leaving town. I'm never coming back. I've won this thing. I'm so happy that I was able to do it for the town, but now it's time for me to go on elsewhere." So we jump forward a year and we're introduced to Jim's brother, Richie. And Richie is now excluded from the run. He doesn't have to do it because a member of his family has already won, but he really wants to do it. He wants to fight in it. He wants to be a part of it. And we meet all of the different kids in the town who are also going to take part in this run. Richie also meets Kelly, who is a young girl in the town that he becomes interested in. The two of them seem to hit it off. She works at the movie theater in town. And so we're building up these character dynamics early on in the film. And then the whole thing with the run is the parents force the kids to be locked in a room for 3 nights prior with no food or anything to kind of get their animalistic instinct and urges risen for when they go out and hunt this thing. And then they are unleashed and not allowed to come back home or not allowed to do anything until Sawtooth Jack is killed. So Richie ends up going out despite his parents telling him not to. And Kelly also ends up joining him, even though girls are not allowed to participate. And so the entire film is Richie trying to hunt down Sawtooth Jack, while also figuring out that everything might not necessarily be as it seems. So it's a really interesting premise. What I really liked about this movie is there's a baseline idea about what's going on given to you, but not every single element is completely explained. And I actually think that that makes the film far more interesting. There's a lot of people complaining online saying we don't get enough information, but I don't think you really need any more information. other than this town has had something happen where they have to do this, or something bad is going to happen to their town. And I think that's so interesting to kind of wrap your brain around the entire runtime. What is happening? Why are these people doing this thing? I also think the time period being set in the 1960s is really interesting because there's very minimal exposure to the outside world. And it kind of made me think throughout the runtime of the film, is this really the 60s, or is this the ideal version of society that the people in this town want to live in? And I thought that was really fascinating to think about the sinister intentions of all that are involved in this movie. I really liked that element of it. I thought the production design in this was spectacular. I loved the look of Sawtooth Jack. There's a couple CGI moments that are a little cheap and rough around the edges, but anytime Sawtooth Jack was shown in a practical way, really gnarly. I loved the attention to detail. The kill sequences in this are brutal and they are mean-spirited. And I say that in the best way possible. I love when horror films get there and get very brutal. There's a couple moments with the kids. There's one kid who's like really adamant about going out and fighting, and there's a period where he's like literally screaming for his mom outside, and it's very visceral and brutal while you're watching it because you realize these are just kids. Like, these kids are being put out there to fight this monster who is brutalizing them. And I think that that was a really interesting take. Some of it reminded me a little bit of Trick or Treat. It has this very sinister tone, which makes the horror elements resonate even more throughout the film. I thought the pacing of this was pretty good. There are some moments where I feel like it's a little bit too padded, that there's some dialogue that doesn't necessarily need to be there. It holds the film back a little bit. I feel like, especially in the middle portion of the movie, there's some things that could be tightened up to make the film kind of pace out a little bit better and be more effective in its third act punch. But it didn't take me out of it enough not to enjoy the overall experiences. Some of the performances are a little hokey, but throughout the film I was wondering how much intentionality was there. I mean, the film takes place in the 1960s, so some of the dialogue is a little bit cheesy and a little over the top, but it just reminded me of a horror film from a different era. I didn't just see it as like, I saw some comments online saying this is like a bad Disney movie or like a CW film, and I never felt that kind of edge to it. It didn't seem like the actors didn't know how to act. It seemed like there was a camp element to it that was trying to make it feel like something like the 1980s Blob, where there's just like an absurdity and an over-the-top delivery of the lines to make it feel like it was something out of a different era. There's a couple of moments that are way over the top that I could understand people thinking it was a little goofy, but it never took me out of the movie. Like I said, I think that it's really effectively paced for the most part. I really liked the third act of this movie a lot. I like the way that it concluded. I really like the lore of this. It's a really unique idea. It kind of is like the Pumpkinhead monster meets the Purge almost, because these kids, once they get out there, they start killing each other. They kill random people on the streets. There's really just no rules whatsoever. The only rule they have is they can't go back home and they have to kill this monster. And I thought that that was a really unique idea and premise, and I was just completely engaged with this movie from the very beginning, and I really liked it a lot. I think I'll only grow to appreciate it more on revisits, and I would say, I know Halloween has passed and we're in November. If you want to watch a unique horror film that has a very different perspective and that has really great attention to detail and the practical effects and the kill sequences, I think you're really going to enjoy Dark Harvest. So if you've seen Dark Harvest, did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you thought. I thought this movie was really entertaining. I very much enjoyed myself from start to finish, and I'm really looking forward to checking this one out again. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.